the West Falls Church TSA Task Force meeting. Just to begin, I'd like to let you all know, as usual, this meeting is being recorded. And I would like to remind everybody that if you are not the active speaker, to please remember to mute your microphone so we can reduce background noise, echoes, and feedback. To start off, we can go over the agenda. So we'll start with the administrative items, which will be the minutes. I'd like to briefly go over the timeline. And I'd mentioned at the last meeting on the 2nd that county staff was having a neighborhood meeting with some of the folks that live east of I-66 on Thursday, February 4th. So I would like to kind of briefly summarize, what happened at that meeting, let you all know some of the feedback we received from those folks. And then we have some representatives from the McLean station, from the Fairfax County Police Department here. Again, speak some of the issues that came up at the end of the last meeting. And then after that, we can move back to resume reviewing the draft plan amendment. As a reminder, I think we've pretty much reviewed all the first draft, with the exception of the issues of building height and land use. So task force can conclude discussing those issues today. And then of course we'll have normal public comment and Q&A period at the end. For those folks who are attendees that are not on the task force, that's when you'll have the chance to ask questions or make comments. And I'll go over how you can do that at that time, but there's a raise hand function you can use. So with that being said, David, I can hand it off to you for the meeting minutes.
Okay, that's fine. I know I had some changes which Brian made, and I think some other people may have. Does anybody have any comments or questions or changes to the minutes? Please raise your hand or just speak up if you do. In the absence of that, I would say I'll consider them adopted unless anybody objects or. All right, I don't see that. Let's consider the minutes adopted. Brian, you're muted.
Thanks, David. And then let me share my screen and put the timeline up. Is everyone able to see that? So, yeah, as I mentioned, we're going to conclude reviewing the original draft plan amendment that we had published back in December. And our plan for the next meeting, scheduled for February 16th, will then be to come back to you all with updates, some of which are recommendations that you all have voted on, some that have just been relayed from community members, some improvements that we've identified in the interim. So before that meeting, we will send you an updated draft that includes all of those recommendations, updates, those recommendations, and we'll be sure to highlight where the changes have taken place. And we're still working on scheduling a public meeting, but as I said, in the interim, we have met with a number of your communities, and we've met with some folks who don't have necessarily a community representative in the task force. So we're continuing to hear from people in the community. There'll be continued opportunities for public engagement, certainly moving forward at the public hearings. We are open to, at the Department of Planning and Development, we're open to more community engagement, hearing people's ideas about this. But like I said, we are planning on scheduling that public meeting still as well. And then still tentatively planning on Planning Commission Board of Supervisors hearings at some point starting in the spring. And then with that, I just want to, like I said, I want to go over quickly some of the stuff we heard from the folks.
Brian, can I interrupt you just a second? Just going back to the timeline for a second. So at the next meeting, do you anticipate that's probably going to be the last task force meeting?
I think it could be. I think it to some degree that might depend on. I think that will either likely be that meeting or potentially one more soon after. I think we'll have some more clarity on that in the next week or two.
That will depend
Um,
somewhat, won't it, on whether we decide we would like to have a task force meeting after the community meeting, correct?
that is right.
As opposed to having the community meeting follow the last task force meeting, whatever that is.
That's right.
Okay.
So you know, there's advantages and disadvantages to that, of course. If
Mhm.
we have the community afterwards, we can present all of the task force work to the community.
It seems as though we would want to have the revised, isn't the task force going to review a revised draft at its final meeting?
That's right. As I said, we're at the meeting in March, on March 16th, we would have a revised draft of the plan amendment to you before that meeting. That includes all of the recommendations the task force has voted on and recommendations that haven't necessarily been voted on but have been discussed. Stephanie, your association sent a number of recommendations that I don't believe the task force voted on, but we on the staff thought that they all certainly would improve the plan, and so we're working to incorporate those anyway. And so yes, that would be the task force would have that for the March 16th meeting.
Stephanie, you okay? You want to elaborate, or are you all right with that? And I would just add, I know we had discussed, Brian, in one of the planning meetings for this, that I thought it would be useful to actually have a real task force discussion at that meeting. I mean, we will have which is maybe what you're saying, but we'll have a clean version of the whole thing now. We can look at it, and it probably doesn't hurt for us to maybe be a little more informal about discussing, how our communities have reacted to this and where we kind of stand on it, because my feeling has always been that whatever we finish tonight is not tantamount to us actually approving or endorsing, I should say, an amended plan. So I think, unless I'm misunderstanding that, we ought to make clear at the next meeting whether we as a task force endorse that, or if anybody would dissent to that or have any problems with any of it based on their community input. Because what we will have after tonight, one hopes, is an actual finished document, but in the same light as we had when some of us were nervous when we started this process of looking at the plan, of working on plan text changes without deciding, do we actually want to change the plan? The idea was always, well, we have to change the text first and then decide. So it seems to me the next meeting is where we kind of decide as a task force how we feel about this as a final thing. Am I okay with saying that, Brian? Is that your understanding how we'll do this?
It is. I mean, I think as we discussed before, David, it's really kind of up to the task force itself to decide what its recommendations are and what its actions are, and what it would like to send to Commissioner Ohlfelder and Supervisor Faust in terms of its recommendations. Some task forces will send a letter kind of detailing their work and what their recommendations are and whether they approve of the comprehensive plan amendment or disapprove of it. They recommend its adoption or not. Some may highlight additional issues that they would like to be considered, and still other task forces make their recommendations on a draft plan amendment, but never actually vote as to whether they approve of the package as a whole or not. But the task forces use this back as potential recommendations. So it's really kind of up to the task force what.
I think somebody has to
as to what that kind of looks like.
Okay. So before you go on to your February 4th meeting, everybody in the task force, having just heard this explanation of this, do you have any comments on this and how we would, just preliminary comments on how we would proceed next week or next month on this?
So I do have, David, this is Darren. And
Yes, Darren.
I've got some comments on that. I mean, I certainly welcome, input from the community, and I think we've gotten quite a bit along the way. I'm just not certain, you know, the the real, um, push to um, have it reviewed by, again, I know a lot of folks have already seen this, right? It's been out in the community, um, and so we've been working on this for 2 years, um, and I'm just not sure what you know the delay would be. I mean, it's you know we're pretty much have gone through all this plain text, and it's we're ready to move forward.
So what do you actually mean? Are you implying that we should consider our final approval text today to be tantamount to actually approving, amending the plan?
So, it obviously we've got some work to do today to get to that point, but again, Brian laid out a number of scenarios that task force do to finish their work, and so this is a general plan, right? And it's something that is we've tightened up considerably, um, and really the real meat and potatoes of this is when they go for rezoning, and that's really when it's critical that the community is out there. I think they're engaged now for sure, and the issues are front and center as they should be. And and so we can continue to tighten up this plan language. I'm just not certain that there's a lot of benefit to running this general guide out to the community. I mean, it'll probably gin people up,
Oh, no, I
but
think you misunderstand me, Darren. I don't mean running it out to the community again. I meant that when we all have this clean copy next week, we we should we should in some form or another indicate how we feel about it, whether that means actually taking a vote or just
well,
going
that's what we're
down.
doing today.
No,
So
no, no,
David,
no, we're not. No, we're not. We're finalizing the changes that are in it, but we are not, in my opinion, in
well,
deciding whether
let,
to endorse the whole thing or
well, but
not.
let's endorse it. Let's just
I
go through
cannot,
this, right?
I will not do that. I will not allow that because I still have to get stuff out to my community based on information I've gotten and get responses back to them before I could do that. Right? I know these are the changes, but I still have information to get back from them that I haven't been able to do that yet. So I'm not in a
Well, okay.
position
So
to
with with
today.
with with
Mm.
with all due haste, I mean, we're 2 years into this process. Okay,
Right, so one
this
more
is
month won't hurt, will it?
well, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a never end. It's this is a Sisyphean task that
Mm.
it's we need to. This is general plan language. Okay, this isn't the rezoning.
Right.
Right? People don't understand where we are and what this really does.
Okay.
We've done a fantastic job of tightening up this language, and so I would have hoped that it would have been addressed with your community and we could move forward. And so I guess if my suggestion is if that needs to happen, then let's schedule another meeting in 2 weeks and not wait a full month.
Can someone else get a word in here?
Yeah, yes, please. Yeah, thank you, Darren. Let's hear from other people.
Yeah, hi, this is Paul. First of all,
Yes.
David, I totally agree with what you're saying. We certainly do have, we're not final. People will look at these things. There's greater interest as it reaches the end. We're not some little cliquey group. This is a matter for the community. Even just a few days ago, 11 members of the McLean Citizens Association, having been alerted to what's going on, sent an email through me to the president of the McLean Citizens Association, opposing the levels of density. And I think that people can say, "Oh, this is just like a general thing," but this really starts the momentum. And having gone this for 2 years with it hasn't really been 2 years. We took off August. There was a substantial time when we didn't meet because of COVID, all understandable, but it's trying to ram it down the throats. More community involvement is better community involvement. And I don't see why another meeting or two makes a difference. And in fact, I'd really like to know exactly what input people have had. I know that the Lemon Road Civic Association has had sufficient meetings to generate statements. In my community, we've had about 15 Google group postings since December. We've had dozens of emails. I've had meetings with the board. We met with an architect yesterday. So, I mean, I feel very confident about what I'm saying, but I would like to hear what other people are saying and what other people have done within their communities, because it's not Paul Rothstein, it's Paul Rothstein, representative of the village. So I'd like to know what people are actually done. What have they actually done? I mean,
Paul, you actually missed an entire year of meetings. You were not here, and we were. And I assume that you
I was up in New York because my mother was in the hospital.
Please.
So I really didn't need to hear any lectures from you about that.
Okay,
and
listen, please.
One other person. Not even one other person.
Brian, can you mute both participants for me, please, until I clarify this? All right. All right. I don't want an argument going back and forth. Paul, I understand your position on that, and you expressed that well. I'm not going to have you get into a back and forth with Cheryl. Cheryl, it's your turn. Go ahead and state your position.
I assume that the role of the task force was to get representatives of the community to come together, and it has been almost 2 years for many of us, and take everything that we've learned back to our communities, discuss it with our communities, and continue to represent our communities on the task force. And there's 3 communities here that are 100% directly affected. I think we've done, as Darren said, a really good job of understanding, of discussing, of getting feedback, of providing feedback. And if we're not toward the end of this process, I have to ask, what was the point of the task force? Why did I spend all this time and effort over literally almost 2 years? I never missed one meeting. So I have no problem, David, us finalizing things tonight according to a majority opinion, taking that back to a community for one final view, bringing those community responses back for one final meeting. I have no problem doing that, but that means we have 1, maybe 2 maximum more meetings. We take a vote as a task force and we decide whether or not we, as the representatives that have been working on this for a very long time, agree or don't agree. And if we agree as a majority, the communities that are involved, then we present to the Planning Commission that we're in favor.
Okay, I don't think that's inconsistent with what I'm suggesting, but I'm not sure. I mean, it's one more, I mean, Brian says we're going to have a meeting anyway, because there are all these things that he outlined that, and we'll have a clean text to look at and all that. So all I am really saying is, I am not saying we do not finalize the text tonight. What I'm saying is finalizing the text is not tantamount to each one of us saying that he endorses or she endorses amending the plan, right? And that's what I would like to leave for next time. I am in no position to do that, and my association would be, I can tell you personally, would be very upset at it, because I have things that I am still going through where I've asked for information. I'm finding some serious problems with the traffic stuff that I need to bounce off of them so they can get back to me how much difference it makes to them. I would not be doing my community a service by voting tonight. So anyway, but thank you. I'm sorry if I shouldn't have let myself respond to you. I should really have gone on to see if anybody else has got a position.
David, may I just respond, since there was literally
okay, but quickly, Paul, because I don't really want to.
I was away for several months. I spent those months in NYU hospital with my mother, and she nearly died. So I really don't. And when she was ready to come back, I rejoined the task force. So I really do not appreciate what Cheryl had to say, and I've been consistent And I've been here and I have notified my community on a consistent basis about what's going on. And we have had multiple meetings. And what I would like to know is I'd like to know what other communities have done. I've not heard one other person identify themselves from the gates. So
Okay.
I'd just like to hear what people are doing because I can tell you what we have done.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And I'm not going to let this get into back and forth. You keep responding to each other, but thank you. Anybody else want to speak about this?
Hi, David. It's Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer. Yes, please go ahead.
Is now a good time?
Yes, please.
Okay, so thank you. So first I'll speak to what we've been doing in our community very briefly, that we have monthly meetings with our association, and Cheryl and I have worked diligently to provide updates. We remind our residents frequently that they are welcome to attend these meetings, that the minutes are posted, that video is now posted, which makes it even easier to catch up. So our community has been fully involved. We've also had folks come and who presented at the task force come to our meetings and walk through things. So our community, I am quite confident, is quite well aware of what is being proposed. The fact that they have not been up in arms or voicing objections and negative feedback is not because they don't know anything about this. It's because they're quite happy with what they're hearing. So there haven't been any major issues that have come up. Cheryl and I both work quite diligently to make sure that if there are, that folks know to tell us so that we can represent those views.
Okay.
So that's what we've been doing in our community. I'd like to also just speak to, I think it has been almost 2 years. I was not involved in the first part of the task force. I think, Paul, I actually joined, I think perhaps around the time you might have been able to resume attending the meeting. So as somebody who has not been here for every meeting, I don't know that precludes somebody from being able to have an informed opinion. But I'll say that the time I've spent has been valuable. I've learned a lot. Our community appreciates the opportunity to have voice in this task force. But I do think it seems like we should be winding down. So I do concur with Darren that it's time to kind of have a definitive, this is when it'll be done. I think Brian was proposing something. So I think, David, I would be thrilled to be able to go to our community, which are our meetings tomorrow night, to say, this is the date. If you have any further thoughts or comments, give them to us. I think if we could do something 2 weeks out just to get this wrapped up, that would be fabulous.
I don't think I'm just speaking personally. I can't count on getting responses from everybody within 2 weeks. I would rather wait till our regularly scheduled meeting, but that's my thing. But I am certainly not advocating going on and on. I was pretty much assuming the next one would be the last one. I'm a little perplexed by people, and I don't mean you necessarily, but by anybody objecting to having one more meeting after we've been meeting so much. That strikes me as a little odd. But yes, I don't want it to go on any more than you, to believe me. It's been a lot of work. I'm ready for it to be over. Anybody else on the task force who'd like to speak to this? I do want to, again, in closing, just remind people that that some of us, and I remember Stephanie was the first one to catch this, and I guess I did too, when it was proposed that that it was going to be on the agenda, that we were going to start going through the plan text and changing it. Some of us said this is the cart before the horse. We don't know that we actually want to change that we actually want to amend the plan. And yet we're being told that we were supposed to change the text. Is that essentially a fait accompli? We've changed the text and then we've amended the plan, or recommending the plan. And the answer that I think I got was no, we have to change the text and then we'll see how we think about it. But changing the text was never per se supposed to be tantamount to saying that we supported amending the plan. We have that, now we react to it. But I'm not talking about more than one more meeting. All right, if we can help it, okay. All right.
David, can I say one thing?
Please, Paul. Yeah.
I've made this offer before, and I'll repeat the offer again. I am totally open to anybody in my community getting any opinion from anyone, and I invite anyone to send me something that I will post post unmodified to my community if they will allow me to do the same. I have nothing to hide.
Mhm.
So I just put that out there. I've said that twice in writing. I want to say it in on the meeting, and and I invite anyone to take me up on it.
Okay, thank you, Paul. In the absence of somebody else either speaking up or raising their hand, I would just like to move on. We are going to be meeting again, one way or the other. So I think when we're finished this tonight, we're finished with the text, and we discuss it next time. Brian, why don't you go on and proceed then? I think we understand what the timeline is here anyway.
Okay, yep, just give me one moment.
Sure.
I think, here we are. Okay, thank you everyone for that discussion. I think it sounds like we know the path moving forward. We'll continue to have our normally scheduled March 16th meeting. I'll send out the invitations for that and post them on the meetings webpage as per usual, and we'll send you out an updated copy of the draft plan text beforehand to review. And that will be posted on the website, of course, as well.
Okay, thank you.
So moving on, I briefly wanted to kind of go over some of the stuff we heard from the folks at our February 4th neighborhood meeting. We had about 25 people attend. These were all folks from east of I-66. And just as both Tim and I gave, Tim from the Fairfax County Department of Transportation and I gave presentations. I updated them on the draft plan amendment, gave background to it, let them know the task force was going through it, making recommendations currently, and just briefly reviewed what the proposed changes are. And then Tim spoke about the West Falls Church Active Transportation Plan. We've discussed here at the last few meetings. And then we also got questions and comments and heard some feedback from them. In general, there was a desire to see improved bicycle and pedestrian connections and safety, both new connections and improving existing ones. They expressed concerns related to traffic on residential streets, particularly those from navigation applications, which I know is not unique to those neighborhoods. We've heard folks in the task force discuss the same issue. There were some comments that we shouldn't focus on speeding up automobiles, again, related to pedestrian safety. And most of these are consistent with what we've heard both from community members of the task force meeting and from task force members so far. Again, there were some concerns related to school capacity and safe routes to school. And I think we've addressed those in the comprehensive plan, or in the plan amendment. We discussed those the last meeting. I think we've made some great improvements related to pedestrian safety recommendations and safe routes to school. I sent you all last week the projections for school capacity, and then I believe I followed that up with the email. Thank you, Darren, for sending me the update about the boundary shift that will improve the capacity issues at McLean High School and Longfellow Middle School. And they had also, just in general moving forward, particularly with the active transportation, West Falls Church Active Transportation Plan, wanted to make sure that they had a seat at the table and could continue giving input at that. And one last item was related to light pollution, which we've discussed previously, and you all will see in that addressed in the updated draft plan text. And David, I know you had questions about that as well. But the Fairfax County zoning ordinance has pretty strict guidance related to light pollution. But I think we can strengthen that again with in the plan text. So I mean, most of it I think was consistent with what we've heard from folks who've been attending the task force meetings so far. And And with that, we can move on. See, we have Jeff. Are you here? Are you able to unmute your mic? We have Jeff Reif from, hopefully I said that right, from the McLean Station, Fairfax County Police Department.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Brian?
I can.
Okay, great. All right, good. Yeah, I have sometimes have some technical difficulties with this stuff. So, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Brian. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to make sure that you could hear me.
No worries. So at the end of the last meeting, there were some concerns expressed related to crime and FCPD's capacity and their ability to serve a new development here. So I didn't know if there were there was some desire on the part of the task force to hear from the police department. Jeff, I don't know if you have any statement you'd like to give, or if you just like to answer questions, and I don't know if you can give a brief introduction of yourself to the task force.
Yeah, sure. I would love that, Brian. Thank you. So my name is Jeff Reif. I am the assistant commander at the McLean District Station. I've been in place for about a year. The captain and I, Dalton Becker, came on about 2.5 weeks before COVID hit. So we were handed like a really bad situation right away. I'm starting my 24th year with the Fairfax County Police Department next month. I've been in law enforcement for almost 27 years now, and been all over the department. Got a bunch of special operations. I was a SWAT guy for 17 years and worked undercover and did a lot of fun stuff. But I have to say, the one thing that I would like to stress to you is I've fallen in this assignment just about a year, and I've never dealt with such nicer people in my whole police career. So our police department, especially the McLean District Station, appreciates the support that you guys have for the police department, because it's overwhelming. I've worked down on Richmond Highway, and it definitely was not that down there from most of the citizens. So with that said, Brian and I had spoken. I know there were some concerns about increase in crime with the influx of buildings and residential areas and stuff like that. Pat Lucas, our crime analyst, and I spoke, and it's difficult to anticipate what crime would increase to in an area. But I can tell you that the police department deals with building and residential areas and everything all the time, and we're not concerned with such a huge influx of crime to the area that we are like discussing it at meetings or anything like that, if that makes sense. We know that it's going to be an impact to the traffic in the area, and we know that the patrol areas are going to be tasked with some additional service type stuff, which I would anticipate to be anywhere from someone calling in that their car had been broken into to maybe domestic disputes. But from a police department standpoint, we're not concerned. We're not concerned as a whole that it's going to be like a huge influx of crime, if I'm making any sense. We know that you guys have done some traffic study, and there's some jurisdictional area there. When it comes to jurisdiction too, where we look at where Falls Church, the city of Falls Church, and some other boundary stuff there, our CAD system, we have it updated, and we would update our CAD system with the new residential area, and the computer would basically tell us where our jurisdiction starts and ends. So we're not concerned with that either. But yeah, I'm just here listening and can answer any questions that I can to the best of my ability. Something that I can't, I will take back, and then I'll be able to get back out, get the information back to you, and we can further discuss it. So I appreciate you giving me the time to at least come and introduce myself, and thank you for all the work that you guys are doing. And I'm open up for anything you might wonder or anything the police department can answer for you right now.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. I'm going to open that up to the task force to see if you've got any questions.
I have a question or two, David.
Okay, sure, Paul.
And I would refer people, and I don't know if I'm sorry if it's Captain Reif, saw the meeting last month, but if you go to the February 2nd meeting, which is on YouTube, starting at 1 hour and 43 minutes, we had an 8-minute discussion where one of the community members, Cheryl Sims, said that Captain Hansen, I guess your predecessor, had expressed concern about what would happen. Then David noted that when the Tyson stations opened up, the crime went up, quote unquote, quite a bit. And then Beth Anderson, who's on a police task force, had said that there was also concern and that there was an increase, I recall, in crime at Mosaic. So, you know, if you go to what different people were saying, including people quoting your predecessor, the view that was given then is different from what you are giving now. And I was just wondering if you could comment on that.
Sure. The Tyson's area with the Silver Line coming in has caused people from out of the area to respond to the Tyson's Corner to do crime. That's why we stood up our Tyson's Urban team, and they handled the malls. A majority of the crime increase was from the metro station and the influx of people coming from out of state, out of the area, and doing crime and then getting on the metro and leaving. So that is correct. With the Tyson's Silver Line opening up, we did have that increase in crime. The Mosaic district, like I said, I can only say for about the last year, the major problem that we've had there has been traffic. We've had an influx of traffic complaints as far as exhaust and people just driving over the speed limit. That's been the biggest issue there. Now, Captain Hansen's comments are correct in one way, that crime will increase, but to a point where it's a wave of crime, I think he was misunderstood, because the calls for service in that area are just going to go up basically because you take an area that's uninhabited right now for the most part, and you put people in there to live. There's going to be medical calls, there's going to be fire calls, there's going to be, we have in the Tyson's area, which we, or in McLean area, which we tell people all the time to please lock your cars at night. We have people that come in from DC and Maryland in droves of 4 and 5 people and walk neighborhoods and just pop doors and steal change and phones and whatever people leave in their cars. So, I mean, we can expect something to happen that because it's target of opportunity at that point. But as far as like a crime wave coming in, there's no way for us to tell if that there's no way for the police department to put a solid number on it. We can say in confidence that services will go up, but not to the point where we're going to say that violent crimes are going to go through the roof and homicides and all kinds of stuff is going to go through the roof. That's just for us. We can't say that. It's just impossible to kind of nail that down. So I hope I answered your question.
You did. I wasn't actually the one who had the conversation with Captain Hansen, so I can't speak to it. There is someone in the community who did, and I would hope either now or during the community session that you might be able to answer her questions, because she is more directly connected to what Captain Hansen said than I am.
And Paul, you mean Cheryl Sim, correct? Who is
I
here?
mean Cheryl Sim, yes.
Yeah, so actually what I'd like to do after I call on, make sure I've got all the task force members called on, and I see Linda has her hand up next, is I will go out of order and check with attendees, and particularly Cheryl, because maybe she can give some context to that statement. So Linda, I'm going to call on you next.
I just wanted to tell everybody that Carol Byer is the new crime prevention officer at the McLean station, and our board talked with her yesterday, and just about what maybe is going on again with the development and what people can do in our community. And so she's going to talk to our monthly board meeting in March. We couldn't fit her in February. She was busy, but you know, I just wanted to tell people that if you do want somebody to talk to your community, Carol Byer is the person at McLean Station that could do that for you.
Thank you very much, Linda.
And I could send you the her email. She said that's the best way to get her.
David, I
Thank you.
can't
Yes,
get my hand
yeah.
raised.
Yeah, okay, sorry, go ahead. Mhm.
First off, Lieutenant Reef, I want to thank you for your service. My mom was on the county force for 10 years, and we appreciate it. So a couple questions that when we discussed Tyson, what came up over and over again with the force was the lack of funding. You know, the citizen, the police were, you know, dragged their schedules, and there weren't enough of them. And I haven't heard from Patrick Smaldor, who's liaison, you know, citizen liaison, any changes in that manner. So that's always one critical area that comes up is funding and the need for more police. And I've heard that from, you know, rank and staff in your department, not very recently, but in the past over and over again. But also, probably more important is, you know, the City of Falls Church is going to have a big town center that's going to bring in a lot of issues from a community safety standpoint. And obviously, it's the City of Falls Church, but I think some of the community concerns that I've heard, and you might hear from other panelists tonight on the task force, is, you know, how is Fairfax County Police going to coordinate with the City of Falls Church, and you know, if there's crime spilling over and issues in that nature? Is there going to be an agreement in place to, you know, share services, those sorts of things? So the two main issues of funding and the coordination with the city and their site. Thanks again.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, the funding issue as far as retention in the police department, not only in the McLean District Station, but across the county has been tough. We've had a lot of officers leave law enforcement in 2020 due to retirements. Some have gone on to other careers, and some have gone on to other professions or other police departments in the area, or some out of the area. So retention and manpower has been tough. We consistently deal with it. McLean has good officers at it, and our specialty units are snatching them up really quick. They're heading up to major crimes. They're heading over to our SOD, or Special Operations section. So we are constantly behind the eight ball when it comes to staffing. Now, the good thing about the officers that work up in McLean and the area is they are not afraid to work. So when there's overtime, we've been having to pay overtime for minimal staffing, and we're having the officers that want to. A lot of the younger officers will work the overtime. So we've been filling the positions. We haven't gone without filling them. So we've been doing really well there, but there has been a problem with staffing and funding. I'm sorry, I'll take that back. Staffing more than funding. Myself and Captain Becker have not had an issue since we've been here in the year about overtime. We have a third quarter review where we sit down with the financial resource division, and we go over overtime hours and stuff like that. And they understand the obstacles that we've been dealing with, especially in 2020, and manpower and officers being down in the whole 9 yards. So overtime's never been an issue as far as that goes. Now, the Tyson's urban team was actually, they were created just because of the Silver Line coming in, and we put those extra police officers into service just to do that job. So Captain Becker and I have kept them during 2020, even when our staffing on the street was lower. We tried to figure out other ways to get services out to the public without having to pull the Tyson's team. Now, when the malls were closed, it was a little easier. We would just roll them into patrol. But now that the malls are back open, they are busy, and they are getting a lot of really, really good cases. And I would say 90 to 95% of the offenders are not even from Virginia. They come over from DC and Maryland. So I hope I touched on that as far as your question, as far as funding and stuff goes. The City of Falls Church. So currently we have a of understanding, so they call them MOUs. We have no criminal jurisdiction in the city of Falls Church, none. So if I mentioned before with our CAD system, our computer-aided dispatch system, it's called a CAD. It has a mapping system that we update all the time. And what will happen is they will take that area and the jurisdictional borders will show where we respond to crime. Now, unfortunately, it's a road, and the other side of the road is Falls Church, and on our side is Fairfax County. So depending on where something happens, it depends on what jurisdiction will respond to that. Now, if there is an additional spillover, then we'll have to talk to the city of Falls Church again and see if there is any way that maybe we can modify the MOU or even recreate one so that we can assist. So that's always an option down the road. It's not written in stone that we would never do it. But as of now, we have no jurisdiction in the city of Falls Church. If I drive through there to get to the other side of the city and get to the other side of the county for any reason, I have no jurisdiction in that city at all. Now, that's different from Herndon and Vienna and the city of Fairfax. But Falls Church City is the only one in the county that we do not have jurisdiction for criminal or traffic, unfortunately.
Thank you very much for that response. I appreciate that clarification.
Hey, can I just ask one question, David?
Okay, but I got Cheryl Smith and a couple of attendees, so if you can make it just short as a follow-up.
Okay. Does that mean Falls Church, the city of Falls Church and Fairfax County can't go into hot pursuit for someone else? That literally, if in this complex where people view it as one complex, regardless of the jurisdiction, that if someone crosses, if you're chasing someone and they cross the line, you can't go into hot pursuit into Falls Church?
Our pursuit policy is pretty strict. It's become strict in the last couple of years. They've done a revision to it. But to answer your question, if we would have to be chasing someone for an extreme violent crime to cross out of Fairfax County into another jurisdiction to continue to chase them. So, for example, if a traffic charge, if someone just ran from a traffic stop and they hit the city of Falls Church city limits, we would cut the pursuit off and turn around. Now, we would notify them and let them know that we're coming towards their jurisdiction, and they could pick it up and continue with the traffic offenses from that point. But to answer your question, we would cut it off right at the city line.
All right. Well, I would just advocate, there's going to be shoplifting, there's going to be other things. I would encourage you all to reconsider what the hot pursuit policy should be between Falls Church and Fairfax County.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. I'm going to have to go on to some other people because we're going to eventually have to get back to doing our plan amendment. Thank you both. Cheryl Smith, continuing on the task force before I go to attendees, you are next.
I just had a quick question along Darren's lines, because we know that there are Metro police in the Metro area. We know that there's University or Virginia Tech security in the Virginia Tech area. We know that there is Falls Church police in the Falls Church area, and there's Fairfax police. Do you guys coordinate? On the other hand, that's a lot of police. That's a lot of security in that fairly small area.
Just to clarify, as far as coordination goes, are you talking about like radio coordination, or are you talking about like physical coordination between the entities?
I'm not sure what I'm asking. I'm just saying that there's a lot of security and police involved here. How does that work?
Well, I can tell you this. I was a police officer in New Jersey, and I didn't realize there were so many jurisdictions that were so close to each other down here until I became a police officer in Fairfax. Our radio systems are programmed in the cars that we have all of the radio. So the COG, the government COG.
Council of Governments.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I got a little brain fart there. They came to an agreement where the radio systems we would share everyone's radio channels. So as far as like I was a dispatch center for about 9 months when after about a year of being a first lieutenant, and we had jurisdictional issues where we would have, for example, the city of Falls Church would be chasing someone out of the city, and their dispatcher would call our dispatcher. They'd immediately call our officers on the radio and let them know that City of Falls Church was heading our way. Now, City of Falls Church would cut their pursuit off at the line, but then we could pick it up based on the continuing crime that we observe in Fairfax County. So we, in the county itself, between Vienda and Herndon and Falls and Fairfax City, and then we've had like Nova Police and George Mason Police, we communicate between the agencies. So what I foresee, and I don't know, just based on the timeline that Brian was telling me, I don't foresee me being the commander of McLean, but I would foresee the next commander or assistant commander that when the development comes up and we see the jurisdictional issues, the jurisdictional obstacles as far as where things are placed, then I'm sure COVID way past then, and we'll have a sit down meeting and figure out like, hey, what are some of the things that we can do to better the services in this area so we're not stepping all over each other? I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to need to move on shortly. I am going to call on the couple of attendees who've raised their hands, but I am going to say, please, let's make this short because we didn't want, even though this is an important issue, we didn't want it to dominate the meeting. And it doesn't directly affect how we change the comp plan or whether we change the comp plan. But, we did have a concern. I'm going to call on Cheryl Sim first because maybe she can explain a little bit where this comment from Captain Hansen came from, or give us some context or whatever she wants to ask. Cheryl, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, David. And I guess Beth Anderson isn't on tonight, but Beth and my husband were both at one of the community-wide police meetings when Captain Hansen, or Alan Hansen, commented to both of them that he had concerns about what this new development was going to bring to our area, because he was concerned by the demands that Mosaic was putting on the station. So I actually went on your open database website to look at crimes from 2016 to 2020, looking specifically at Mosaic and then looking at our general neighborhood. And in that 4-year time frame, there were about 350 crimes, drug violations, drunkenness, aggravated assault, swindling, and vandalism, trespassing down in Mosaic, where we had about 12 in our area, which were basically DWIs. And as Darren Ewing just mentioned, we're going to have this kind of town hall center in the Falls Church City section, but the metro, which would be kind of the logical escape route for some people looking to cause mischief, is in Fairfax County. So as you're talking about jurisdictional obstacles, it seems to me that this is probably something, since the Falls Church City part of the project's already kind of far along, that you would probably want to look at. But I guess, I don't know how much time you spend in a 4-year period on 350 crimes versus 12, but it just seems like it's something that people should be cognizant of, that the basic crime rate will increase in our area. That's all I have to say, David. Thank you.
David, if I may just answer really quick.
Yes, please go ahead. I was muted anyway. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I mean, I agree. I'm not saying that there won't be an increase in services to include crime in this area. I'm not saying there won't be. It's hard for the police department to predict what it is going to be that will bring it to the area. If there was a proposed different kind of buildings or something going up, like I don't even know what to use as an example, but it would be a little bit easier to try to figure out like if there's like major concerns. If I'm trying to make sense. So I agree with. I don't know. We could always ask Captain Hansen what his. I could always ask him to clarify what he meant by that.
I have a feeling he was focusing on the city's development because that's the big one. I mean, I think people have a tendency to look at this whole thing as one big development since it's all going to get developed one way or the other. But I don't know, of course, not having been at that meeting.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, the city of Falls Church may be looking at allotting a new patrol area with additional patrol officers. They may. Now, it doesn't mean that once this residential area and everything gets built and it's done and we evaluate after 1 or 2 years and that services have increased, we may adjust our patrol areas that we have, maybe one officer that works that area, or split the area and have 2 officers that work it halfway in between, like cut it in the middle. I'm not saying that we wouldn't do that, but that's something the county does every couple of years anyway. We will take crime data and we'll readjust. But like we're in the middle of right now of doing a whole patrol area reconfiguration throughout the whole county because we're going to be building a South County patrol station down in the Lorton area. So we're doing it right now. We dropped off of data, but it's hard to predict the future data. So I could always I will actually talk to Captain Hansen. He's still with us. He's not retired.
Okay.
So I'll talk to him and see.
Okay, we don't mean to make a real big deal of this, just that it having been raised a little, we kind of wanted to know what we were dealing with. I'm going to call out, thank you very much. I'm going to call on Robin next, and then I am going to call on Patrick Lucas because I remember when he used to, as an officer, be at all the MCA meetings and update us on crime. But Robin first, and then Patrick, and then we're just going to have to call an end to this because it's 8 o'clock and we have not gotten to our main job this evening of finishing the plan amendment text. Robin, you're next.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had my hand up by accident. I didn't realize it was up. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, it's nice to hear your voice anyway. Thank you. All right. Officer Lucas, as we always used to call you at the MCA.
Yeah, I did retire, but what I was going to say is we do have a monthly meeting that we can discuss all of this stuff at. We don't need to hijack your meeting.
Okay.
Obviously, this is going to have an impact, but I don't know that this is the vehicle to address all of that. And as Lieutenant Reef said, we have no idea what's going to be built. Whatever is going to occupy these things is going to have an impact on the services. If it's a bar with people drinking or it's a store, cell phone store. So, we have within our capacity to adjust and we look at these things. So yes, we do have some concern. And I did work with Captain Hansen while he was here. And I don't know that he's got much more to say about this, but yes, these things do have an impact on us. It does bring additional criminal activity, but it's in proportion to all the other things with traffic and services too. So I don't know that he necessarily needs to weigh in on this, but I think, for that, we can all agree you're changing the use of the space. It's going to add additional work for us as an agency. But you're more than welcome to come to our monthly CAC meetings and send emails. We have a good team there to help answer these questions.
Thank you very much. It's nice to hear your voice again after several years. I think I'm going to cut this off now. And I do want to thank, I'm sorry, is it Captain Reeve?
It's Lieutenant, sir.
Lieutenant, okay. Thank you very much for coming and providing us this information. And I would like to just leave everybody with remembering that while we're interested in crime and everything, if we're really focusing on what we're doing here, which is the plan change, it seems a little unlikely that changing from one set of allowed uses on this particular space to another set of uses, if we amend the plan, is going to be much, it seems to me, it's my own personal view, is going to contribute very much to the growing of the crime. The Metro brought it into Tyson's, but the Metro's already here. So are we really going to be attracting more people? And probably not through the plan amendment anyway, I would think. I think now I would like to get back to what we really need to be doing, which is the draft plan amendment. So Brian, you want to take over from here?
Yeah, I can share my screen. Like I said, within our email and earlier, we've gone through the draft text, and there are really just a couple of items left the task force still needs to consider. The building height, the topic of building height, and then following that, the land use recommendations in the draft plan. So we have here in the draft the height map that shows 115 feet in height. I know Virginia Tech had, as I updated you all a few weeks ago, perhaps last month, has agreed to lower the portion of that building adjacent to the village down to 105 feet. And we distributed their shadow study. And then we also sent to the task force the web scene shadow study that the Fairfax County put together. So you can view that throughout the year and different days and different heights. And so with that, actually, David, I'll turn it over to you for any task force discussion on the subject, or if there are any motions.
Okay. This map is then related to what other things in the document? Is it pretty much by itself?
It's this map, which we previously discussed moving, so it's actually right next to the section of the text that discusses building.
Oh, right.
So yeah. So it's this map on page 9 of the draft text, which again is 115 feet, would be going down to 105 feet. And we would update that prior to the next meeting. And then under the urban design recommendations, building massing and heights on page 17 of the strike through version.
Okay.
Let's see, I think the task force, I believe, already actually approved the first.
We were going to revisit figure 18 is what I have down here.
The first couple of paragraphs. Figure 18. Oh, figure 18 people. I think there were some questions as to whether this needed to be included or whether it accurately represented the text. I think we're going to remove that from the subsequent draft, but that wasn't related to height.
Okay, I'm just trying to see if you addressed the height issue that you focused on page 9, figure 15, whether that then leads us to have to immediately go to somewhere else in the text that it relates to.
It does, yeah. Page 18 at the top of the page, that paragraph.
Oh.
And actually beginning line 24 on page 17 through line 9 on page 18.
Okay. All right, so I guess what I should say is, does anybody have a comment, first of all, on the map and on the building heights that are represented there? Is everybody comfortable with allowing these building heights, or have any comment on, on those heights with the change that the 115 will go down to 5?
I do have a comment or two, David.
Sure, Paul.
Okay, so part of this issue that we have is just how quickly it's come upon us, in the sense that first it was going to be 125, then it was going to be 115, and then we appreciate totally the 105, but it sort of rushed our independent analysis. So we had an architect do a review, and the things that we've seen, what he did is he gave us a 3-dimensional view of what's going on, and people aren't thrilled about the height, but at this point, the real issue is looking at what he talked about is really the buffer. So, as I said, this came up so quickly. I've not done this before. I'm not sure how we actually address the buffer, and it's not just the preference of our community. There is this concept of, in I think it's objectives 8 and 14 of the Fairfax County Comprehensive Plan, that say, it's not supposed to really be disruptive to the community. So, we need some way to raise the issue that we don't feel that we have enough of a buffer. And I don't know if you deal with that through density. I don't know if that means you push back the height limit of, a sufficient number of feet. I haven't, we heard the concept yesterday, and we're trying to wrestle with it with a bunch of people who are not professionals. The one other thing I'll say, and this is what I asked the architect to look in the general area, and I don't know if Jennifer and Cheryl are aware of this, but this was his comment. There are significant shadows that are cast on the gates during the spring and fall. These are nearly identical, but much more significant than those cast on your development. I don't know if they're aware of that. That's what our independent analysis came up with. I don't, Cheryl, I believe, is on the board. She has a fiduciary duty. So, I want to put that out there as something we learned yesterday, not only about ourselves, but about them. And I'd like to know how we address in a plan amendment the fact that we need to, consistently with the Fairfax County comprehensive plan, to get a little bit more buffer, And once again, I note there's significant parkland in the area. And for some reason, the parkland is not being put closer to us so that Fairfax County can have its parkland and we can have a buffer. That, to me, I think Virginia Tech has done a nice job, and I appreciate it, of reducing, so not necessarily eliminating the height issue, but we still have a buffer issue. And that became very clear when we looked at the three-dimensional rendering yesterday.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Brian, do you have a response to that? I mean, it'd be nice to just be able to vote on the height, but where can we address buffer stuff?
Yeah, well, we did try to address it in the draft amendment. We added some additional. We have the map that shows landscape buffers, pedestrian circulation. We added some additional landscape buffer between the proposed Virginia Tech building and the village. So that we certainly understand the desire and the need to have a buffer there, and so that was the purpose behind the inclusion of that.
But this, I take it, Paul, is not really, since you would have known about this already, this is, I take it, not satisfying what you're concerned about.
It's not satisfying. We got this three-dimensional rendering, and then we say, whoa, that's really close. So, I'm not an architect. We haven't had time to engage architects enough. I spoke, I've asked our board to re-engage with the guy because we learned about it only yesterday. And, just having this thing towering over us, maybe we could live with 105 feet. Actually, I believe now that the problem of the shadow is more a Gates problem than it is our problem. But there's still some problem for a few months out of the year. But the real question is, what do we do to get a buffer? And in particular, and this is what just rankles me, is that I totally support this concept of Fairfax County getting a park and more parkland. Great, that's wonderful. But why isn't there a plan that brings some of that parkland closer to us so that Fairfax County can keep its parkland and we can have more of a buffer between, against this very large building? And I'm not screaming we need it to be 45 feet, even though when the architect looked at what's currently zoned at, it's a significant zoning change. So we'd like something, and I don't know how it's reflected in here, to give us more of a buffer. And I just simply point out again and again, there's going to be parkland. And why should my complex bear the burden for all the parkland in Fairfax, for the rest of Fairfax County, when some of that can be worked out, and they're the architects, I'm not, so that some of that is buffering us against this building?
Okay, Paul. Before I go pursue this, I want to see, does anybody else besides Paul have any concern about this map and this height and anything related to it?
David, this is Jennifer. Since
Jennifer
has been called out numerous times, I thought it might be good just to share with everyone and put it officially on the record that first, thank you, Paul, for sharing your resource and apprising us of your the architect that your association is working with had thoughts about the gates. my association, we've actually consulted with our own registered architect, who did not have any major concerns. So we sat and quizzed this person here and there. We also asked about the villages in the pavilion, because we're not looking to support something that negatively impacts any of the properties here. That's not in anybody's interest. But our conclusion was that it's minimal impact on the gates. So we had no objections to the heights, and none have been voiced to us from our community.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Is there anybody else who wants to speak on this? If there's not, what I'd like to do is figure out how we can deal with this map and deal with the buffer separately, because it would be nice if we could at least get the map approved, or if Paul is not comfortable with it, I don't know whether that means voting, just taking a vote on this from which he dissents or not. But Brian, maybe you can explain to me, is it possible that Paul's buffer issue can be, I mean, we're only changing the comp plan text. So when there's actually an application for a zoning change, can that, business of a buffer or reworking that legitimately be a part of that that application? Can that be deferred? I mean, I know Paul might be comfortable deferring it, but is it possible this kind of thing can be decided later, or are we basically building in no buffer of the type that Paul wants by voting on this height change?
Yeah, I don't think the height really, they're separate issues, I guess, the height and a buffer. So voting on the map and the height text, I don't think necessarily affects that issue.
Okay, all right.
So they can be dealt with separately.
All right. And
well, can I just say something?
Yes, Paul.
I'm not an architect. I don't claim to be. But zero height over a little tract of land is the equivalent of having a buffer. So I'm talking as someone who doesn't have a background in this, and I could be voted down, and that's fine. But where would you address the buffer? Because if I can't see the buffer adequately addressed, then I just vote against it, and maybe that's okay. Just vote against the 105 feet height, even though we're very grateful to them that they came down.
The buffer, I think, would most appropriately be addressed in the figure that I pulled up just a moment ago that shows here, figure 16. That shows the landscape buffers throughout the transit development area.
Well, then could I ask, have we voted on that yet?
No, that's what I'm trying to figure. Can we vote? You mean on the buffer or on the height?
Well, what I'd like to see is that we vote on the buffer, and then, if it's satisfactory, then we could go on to the height. If I can't get something on the buffer that is satisfactory, then I just vote against the height. We go to a vote and I just vote against the height. And what happens, happens. But ideally, I would like not to vote against the height. So I propose that we go to the buffer first and see what can be done. I'm not sure enough can be done to satisfy our board of directors.
What do you think? Yes, Stephanie, please go ahead.
So the paragraph that we're looking at starts with maximum building heights. And then there's a section on transportation, and then there's a section headed parks, open space, and landscape buffers. So perhaps if we discuss parks, open space, and landscape buffers, we will find something that we're talking about sub A2, which is the Virginia Tech, right?
Yes.
But actually, what's across from it. Can we find some comfort there that will enable us to go back to the building heights? And further point, are we saying now 105 feet instead of 115 feet?
That's correct. They've agreed to lower it.
Okay.
Brian, does this mess you up to do what Stephanie is suggesting? Because I know you felt we needed to do the building heights first.
No, if the task, it's up to the task force if they would like, if you all would like to discuss the landscape buffers before moving on to the building heights.
Is that all right with everybody? Anybody object to that? Okay, let's try that and say, I am concerned about whether we'll actually finish this tonight at this rate, but I'm not belittling Paul's concern at all. The only trouble is if we do the buffers, I mean, is it possible to give Paul what he's asking for as a buffer without really compromising what Virginia Tech has agreed to? Because they were not going to put a park in there, correct? So, are we doing something mutually inconsistent here?
Well, I guess there's two different. I guess we would view a landscape buffer differently from a park. I suppose there's actually we have a description of landscape buffer areas right here in the comprehensive plan. It states they're strips of land that are intensely planted with trees and shrubs, often including berms, are generally recommended on parcels of limited land area where such parcels are abut existing low and medium density residential development. And then that refers to figure 16, which depicts the landscape buffers, which I had pulled up just a moment ago. You can,
So Paul, are you satisfied with that sort of thing? Or are you asking for something that's actually larger that would really require Virginia Tech to really redo that whole building scheme?
Well, this isn't we aren't at the zoning part yet. So
Right.
if we could just get a reference to sections 8 and 14 here, just to be clear that whatever is approved has to be consistent with objectives 8 and 14. I get, for now, that'll be good enough that I'll just abstain on the 105 feet. And we can leave it at that. I mean, if we can't have something a little more beefed up to just simply say that it is really the intent that even though it's implicit, that it really is the intent for objectives 8 and 14 to be met, then this can be put off, I suppose, until zoning, and I'll just abstain on the 105 feet. Other than voting against it.
Okay, is that workable, Brian?
I think you're referring to objectives 8 and 14 of the land use policy.
Yes, that 2017 document.
Yeah, we can try to incorporate those into.
Can we do that in real time right now?
I figured we would come back with that at the next meeting when we come back with an updated.
That makes sense. It might be hard to really sit there and figure out exactly where it should go.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So in that case, what I think I'm hearing is we can go ahead and vote on figure 15 and the height change. Let's see how best to do that. Can you I think we still have 8 people here because I don't think Christopher ever joined us. So we have 8 task force members here. I guess I can ask for raising hands if everybody is able to raise their hand, and if they're not, just speak out. So the motion here, which I can make and somebody can second, I guess, is that we adopt this map with the change, which is figure 15, with the change of 115 down to 105.
Second.
Okay, second. Okay, so I would like everybody in favor of it to raise their hand, and if you can't raise your hand, just tell me.
Yes.
Yes, that's Darren.
Correct.
Okay, all right. All right. Jennifer says yes. Okay. Sorry, I got to go back and forth here and see.
Do you mean literally raise your hand for the camera or raise your
No,
hand?
I'm sorry. No. I'm sorry. I mean, raise your hand on the screen. Do you know how to do that? You go under the participants thing, I think, and then there's a little thing that says raise hand.
There we go. I was going to say,
Okay.
I'm the only hand.
No, you've got yours up, and Stephanie and Cheryl. Let's see. Linda says yes. Who are we missing? Holly, are you here somewhere? Holly, if either raise your hand or unmute yourself and tell me if you vote for this.
She's raising her.
Are you
hand,
yes?
Here, I might be able to unmute her.
Okay. Holly, are you in favor of adopting this map with the 105?
Okay, you're unmuted, Holly.
Holly, can you tell me, are you in favor? The motion is to adopt figure 15 with the change to 105.
I certainly have said yes several times.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, you weren't unmuted, I guess. All right. Sorry
No,
about
I
that.
haven't been muted. Maybe Brian didn't unmute me. I didn't notice.
I think something
I
something
raised my
must have
hand.
happened.
I have an old iPad, and so I don't have the little thing.
I know,
says-
that's why I was trying to make sure that we got you. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I'm going to abstain on that.
Pardon?
I'm going to abstain on that.
And I'm going to join you actually, because I'd like to make sure that this is considered. I would put the peace of mind of communities above somebody being able to raise their building to that height, frankly. So I will do the same thing. So I think what we have is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 in favor, 2 abstentions, and no opposed. Is that what you got, Brian?
That's what I have.
Okay, all right. So having done that, that means essentially it's passed and we have changed that. What do you want to go on to next? Do we have to go on to the thing you were referring to, or is that separate? Whatever you want to do.
Which item was that, David?
Well, you had referred something to page 17, but then you said it isn't really related to this. I'm just going to follow what course of addressing these unresolved issues you think is best.
It was the final paragraph of building massing and heights, the building massing and heights section, which begins on line 24 of page 17 and ends on line 9 of page 18.
I'm sorry, you said it starts at page 24?
No, line 24, page 17.
Page 17, let me get to it. Because before the meeting, I made a note of everywhere I thought we had not yet disposed of everything. Oh, line 24, right, I remember that.
It's because it contains a reference to the 115 feet.
Right, okay.
That's why we skipped over this.
Does everybody see that and understand why we're looking at that? All right, so now the only
David,
issue.
Why
Yes.
are we looking at it? I see it, but I'm not understanding why we're looking at it.
Because there is a reference on line 6 of page 18 to building heights, or line 7. It says portions of the buildings that are directly across the villages should be no more than 115 feet height if it is demonstrated through mechanisms, blah, blah, blah. That it's, and now we can't leave the 115
Right,
because
that
we
is the
voted on the
correct-
105. So
That
that's
was
all we're
the-
changing, Brian, correct?
Okay. Yeah, I think this whole paragraph, the task force had skipped discussing
Yes,
previously, I believe, because of that reference to the building height. So
okay,
if there were any comments related to it, I think we want
right, you're right. If there's anything else that's bothering you, take a look at it quickly.
I think the answer, I think the question, the way it should be read now is portions of the buildings that are directly across the villages should be no more than 105 feet, period.
Right, oh.
Yeah, and that's an update we can make.
Is that, you agree, Brian? The rest of that doesn't really belong there now after the height mention?
Yeah, we can make it
Okay.
for the portion of the building that are, yeah.
Okay,
Actually, but if I could just make one, it should be 105 feet, period. And then it should say, it should also say mechanisms such as shadow studies, cross sections, and building design should demonstrate that the proposed height does not adversely affect residences in the development. Even if it were 80 feet, if it adversely affected the residences in the development, it still shouldn't be. We're in the comprehensive plan amendment stage, but we're not saying you're clear up to 105 feet. We're saying we can. There's the zoning. The zoning is later on, and we can revisit that issue then.
that makes sense to me. Does it to you, Brian? I think.
Sorry,
Because-
Paul, you.
Well, I would agree with Paul on this. I mean, there is still a possibility that even though we're lowering it to 105, there's a possibility that some shadow studies will find that this can't be done well. And then in the zoning stage, somebody brings up and says, I know it says 105 feet, but the shadow studies are showing, or other studies are showing that it could have negative effects. So I think it does make sense to leave it in.
Okay, we'll include the.
bad.
So the way it would read would be,
Well,
should be no more than 105 feet high, period.
okay, we'll include the changes in the revised text that we send out before the March meeting.
Okay, can we vote on, does everybody understand what this change is? I mean, can we actually vote on changing this paragraph now?
Can you repeat the whole language one more time, and then let's just put it to a vote?
Okay, all right. What it says, we're only talking about starting on line 6. Portions of the buildings that are directly across from the villages should be no more than 105 feet height, period. And then, Paul, will you read the sentence that you'd put in after that?
Well, that's where it's, okay, this is where I kind of.
The existing sentence?
The concept would be that shadow studies cross-section, it would be, I think what we say, mechanisms such as shadow studies, cross-sections, and building designs should indicate that the proposed height will not adversely impact residences in that development. However you word that to keep it open for the zoning portion,
Right.
That's the concept.
I'm thinking maybe we ought to, are you comfortable with voting on the 105 feet, but then leaving the voting on the language till Brian comes up with specific language?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'm going to ask everybody else if they're comfortable doing it. The idea is paragraph is to accept the whole paragraph until we get down to the 115 feet, change that to 105, but then all the language that comes down there is going to be reworked to make it clear that it is still possible to to not go up to 105 feet if certain studies show that it's had an effect. And Brian's going to work on that language. We'll vote on that next time, but we're voting on this paragraph up through 105 feet. Okay. Any comments on that before we vote?
I mean, that for me is it does seem to drag out what we're trying to avoid at this point, which is a resolution to this. Personally, I don't see an issue with inserting language in there, but perhaps we could develop that now and vote on it and just move forward on this issue. What Paul is proposing is not out of bounds. So let's just, Brian, is there some language you can develop? And perhaps we circle back in 5-10 minutes and we finish it. Simple.
I mean, Paul, it sounds like you're proposing then to keep this existing language more or less, but changing it to 105 feet, period, and then having a separate sentence that will mostly be this.
Well, I think I can do it now.
Okay, all right.
Period. Then you take out if it is demonstrated through, and then the new sentence is mechanisms such as shadow studies, cross sections, and building design should indicate that the proposed height does not adversely impact residences in that development. The only thing I would say, because I don't know this well enough, if the words proposed height are correct, I don't know, the proposed height during the zoning process, that's the one thing that I don't, as a drafting point, know. Maybe, Brian, you could just help us with that right now.
Yeah, that's a reference to the proposed height of any, of any proposed building that, because the comprehensive plan deals in, recommendations in general without a specific application before it, even though in this case we have some developers on board. That's why it's, not referencing a certain building. It's referencing a future proposed building during a zoning application.
So referencing a future proposed building is consistent or inconsistent?
It's consistent. So the proposed height is the language we have in here already, and that's referencing a proposed building in a zoning application.
Okay, so then we could just say mechanisms such as shadow studies, cross sections, and building design should indicate that the proposed height does not adversely affect. So you just say, take out if it is demonstrated through, start a new sentence, mechanisms such as shadow studies, cross sections, and building design, and then say should indicate and then that the proposed height does not adversely impact residences in that development. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Do you have it written down, or do we need to repeat it?
I've got it written down. Thanks, Paul.
Okay. So David, I move that that amendment be adopted.
Second.
I was muted. I heard the second. Okay, so I'm going to vote. What I'm going to do, I think this time is, if anybody has got an objection or wants to abstain, speak up. Otherwise, I'm going to consider that everybody has voted in favor of this. I don't see any hands up or anybody saying anything. So let's say that that is a unanimous change. We've adopted that unanimously. And in that case, I guess when you're ready, Brian, go on to whatever you think is the next thing we need to look at.
That's right. The next item was the land use recommendations. So those are kind of at the smallest level at the subunit, and then there are references to it at the land unit level and the TDA level. But those ultimately are informed by what the subunit level recommendations are.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it might make more sense to start at that first. We can.
All right.
So I have subunit A1. I believe we had. This is page 20, beginning on line 40.
I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of clacking. Does somebody need to mute? Because I'm having a hard time hearing Brian.
I think that's Brian typing, isn't it? Or isn't it?
No, sorry. I think that may have been Paul.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Jennifer, for pointing that out. So, so tell me what page and line we are on again, Brian.
So page 20, line 45 through page 21, line 4.
Okay.
And this is of the track changes version.
Okay.
It begins with the subunit description, saying that it's planned for public facility use at base level, which is the current recommendation. The optional level, what we had discussed previously, mixed use at a maximum intensity of 0.96 FAR, inclusive of bonus intensity, as the between 105 and 120,000 square feet of office use, 10,000 and 30,000 square feet of ground floor community serving retail or active ground floor uses. Maximum of 900 dwelling units, which includes approximately 80 townhomes.
Does anybody have any comments on this? No. Okay. Does everybody feel that they're comfortable voting on this then? Because if we don't have any comments or concerns, I'll ask for a motion to approve that change.
I move to approve the change.
Okay, seconded anybody?
Second.
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Yeah, sure, Stephanie.
All right. So LRCA has written twice to the, I guess, to staff and the planning commission, and we've asked for the WMATA's parcel, the developable land, to be identified, because the gross uses, the gross square foot is 20. I'm sorry, it's late and I'm tired. I'm mixing up 25, it's 25 acres, is it? But there's a garage, which is shown on one of the diagrams as open space, but it's a parking garage. And then there's that drainage area. And if you take out the parking garage and the drainage area, you come up with 17 square feet maybe. We've asked for that to be defined, and we've never received an explanation of it. I would like to receive an explanation of it.
So the developable land, not including the acreage of the WMATA area, subunit A1, not including the already forested area and the drainage pond and the parking garage.
Right, because if we're talking about how many units for all the part that's developable, but the parking garage is staying there for a while, and we're recommending that that bottom land not be developed, that could be a different number. I think I'm going to abstain on this vote because I don't think we've had an answer. I would like an answer.
May I ask if an association has repeatedly asked a question, why should we have a vote before that association gets the answer?
So what can we do about this then? I'm not interested in pushing a vote either if somebody's uncomfortable with this. Is it really not Stephanie, is your point that it really shouldn't be considered 0.096 if these other areas are taken out?
I don't know what it really is if these other areas are taken out, and I don't know if those numbers of things are appropriate. I just feel uncomfortable saying, yeah, sure, go to 120 feet and let's do this many units, because I don't feel like it's been adequately explained and answered.
Okay.
So just for clarification, if I may,
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
The area of concern that you're talking about is undeveloped piece of the project and how what is currently a parking garage and how that will affect the density because it will be unbuilt. Is that what I'm understanding? What your question is?
Yes.
And so what they're proposing and the densities at the floor area ratios, it's only a matter of how those sub areas, in what schedule they get developed, right? Because what their ask is we already know. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but this isn't something that's unknown issue. We know what the square footage requested is. We've got the FAR, and that's what we've got in front of us is this language. What she is referring to, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is down the road what will be developed in which order and how that will impact the site. Is that right?
I just don't know if that calculation is correct. If it includes if the garage is not in the numerator, then it shouldn't be in the denominator. I want to see the calculation. And that these numbers are being proposed for which parts of the site?
Yeah, the 0.96 FAR is for the tax map parcels identified here, which is inclusive of the entirety of subunit A1, which includes the area where the garage is, and it includes that parkland. That doesn't necessarily mean that there will be development on there, similar to how that 0.96 FAR includes areas where there will be new streets or there will be parkland. It references those specific parcels that are described in that section. So it's let me pull up the subunit map. The 0.96 floor area ratio refers to everything here within the subunit A1 boundaries.
Brian, so does this essentially saying, let me see if I've got this correct. So if it refers it's referring to the entire land unit A1, correct? Is what you're saying?
That is correct.
All right.
That's right.
So if any undevelopable areas, such as Stephanie's talking about, that strip of land along the edge there that can't really be developed well, that we don't want developed, if that's included in this, doesn't that essentially say that they can build higher in other places to compensate for it?
That's right. Yeah.
Because that's how it would be if we're a parcel. If you said you had a 1.0 FAR, you could build one story on the whole parcel, but you could also, if part of it were a park, like half of it were swamp, that means you wouldn't build there and you'd build a 2-story building on half the lot.
That's right.
So essentially, the more land that's included in here that's undevelopable, the more densely you can build on some of the other areas. But then doesn't the parking garage being built, what is it, 7 stories or 8 stories or something, if that actually skews it in the other direction, does it not?
I guess the parking garage wouldn't count towards floor area ratio. That doesn't include parking structures.
Okay, but it does include parking. I mean, it does include parks and open land and all that.
So that parks and open land count as the area part of the floor area ratio. So it's floor area versus land area, right? And so 0.96 FAR for land unit A1 would mean that if somebody were developing it with a 1-story building, 96% of land unit A1 would be indoor, floor area of the building.
So this is something that's been proposed, for the past year on the entire site. It's crazy that we're asking for downzoning on the whole parcel. I mean, I think we're confusing FAR from land use, folks, and this is not a known, unknown. We know this. This is what, it's the 0.96 FAR.
And
I assume this number didn't come from the air, right? The staff took the number based on a lot of the drawings that we've seen over the past, how long? How did you arrive at the number to put into the document?
The 0.96 FAR was originally proposed in the site-specific plan amendment nomination back in 2018, and the board authorized us to study this at an intensity of up to 0.96 FAR.
And the
And
point,
so here we are today.
0.96 was calculated like this.
But didn't that actually come?
Get that?
Didn't it come from the developer? Wasn't it that the developer asked for that?
WMATA had asked for that.
Well, that's what I meant. It asked for it to be a 0.96 FAR. So that's where it actually came from, correct? That's where it originated.
Yeah, WMATA had asked for it, and the board authorized that back in 2018.
Yeah, but again, we've been talking about this for 2 years. This is not unknown, and these
But
numbers
how
are not
was
new.
it derived?
We've been talking to
How
Stephanie.
was it derived?
An answer. I'm sorry, Stephanie, go ahead.
How was it derived? Just show me the equation, write it out on a blackboard. Is it that hard? I mean, I haven't seen it. LRCA hasn't seen it.
Brian, do you have that? Do you have that calculation?
I believe I had it in the. Give me one moment. I think I included it in the December meeting presentation. I can pull that up.
Perfect.
In Stephanie's defense, she says she's been asking for this for a while, and if her association, which is pretty sophisticated, still doesn't understand that, then I think it's worth making sure that everybody does.
I don't recall seeing that in the questions we received, and I don't. Stephanie, you and I and
Right.
Rob.
It wasn't in the last one. It was in the January 2018 and the January 2020. It was in both of those submissions. So we didn't resubmit it. But on pondering the FAR, we remembered that we asked this question, and we kind of wanted to have an answer before we.
I apologize. I thought we had addressed that.
But it didn't derive from a calculation, did it? It was simply proposed by the developer because they had, or by WMATA, because they had decided that is how intensively they want to develop it, right? Is the question where did it come from, or is the question what is actually the effect when you consider all these other parcels that, Stephanie, that you're mentioning, that you seem to feel maybe, I think what I'm hearing you say is that maybe skews what the actual number really would be.
Bingo.
Okay.
So
and so the question to you, Brian, is where's the calculation? Show her the calculation. Show us the calculation, and we can move forward.
Yeah. So I mean, it's you would take the square footage of the site. It's about 24 acres. 24 times 43,560, which is how many square feet there are in an acre, and multiply that by 0.96. And with that, you get approximately 1,004,000 square feet. Doing the same calculation with the Virginia Tech tract, subunit A2, is approximately 817,000 square feet.
Does that help?
So I'm not an
Stephanie?
architect or an engineer either. I'm an accountant, and I can usually follow calculations, but I don't know the meanings of these. Why are you multiplying by 0.96? I thought that's what we were deriving. We were trying to derive the 0.96.
Give me one moment.
So I can explain that real quick because I do finance as well. And so what Brian laid out was that the acreage, which is it reflected in 1,000 of square feet, by the number of acres, multiply that, came up with your number, and then 0.96 is the actual floor area ratio and that's comes up with a 1 million plus number that is the square footage you're looking for. So that's the calculation.
Darren, so you're saying you start not with the FAR, but you start with the amount of square footage that you want, and then the FAR comes from that. Is that correct? That's the direction you're going?
So it's apples to oranges, I would assume, but basically you're taking the total land area, okay, which is 25 acres, but that's expressed in thousands per acre. What 43,600, I believe, which is what you said, Brian, and it's 25 total acres, so that's your multiplier is 25. Then you get that number, and you multiply that by 0.96 because it's a reflection of a fraction of that 1 acre, right? It's not a full. The relationship is 0.96 floor area ratio, not 1, 2, or 9, like in the Rich Carlton down in Tyson's 2 is a 9 floor area ratio. So then you would. Does that all make sense?
So, David, this is Ben, and I think I just noticing Andrew may be looking to speak up, and he can speak too. I think how his came up with these figures. So I'll let him answer.
Well, yeah, no, I'm where I was actually going, and it's actually probably where Brian is too. So floor area ratio is most often used to express development intensity land uses, and it's the measurement of a building's, like the total floor area of all the sums of all the buildings on a particular piece of lot or parcel that the building is located on. So FAR is usually expressed as a decimal number, and it is derived by dividing the total area of the building by the total area of the parcel. So, if you had 1 acre, 4,000, what is it, 43,560 square feet. If you had 1 acre at a 1.0 FAR, that would mean you could do a maximum building of 43,560 square feet. So that's a 1.0 FAR. And I think what Brian is showing here is, that could be covering, a 1-story building that covers the entire acre, or it could be a 2-story building that covers half of the acres, if that makes sense. Or you could stack it up, but that means you have more open space the higher you go, and you still don't exceed the sort of 1.0 FAR, if that makes sense. So that's typically, you take the parcel of land, in this case the 24 acres, you multiply that by the 0.96, and that then shows how much maximum square footage you can have, assuming that you are limited to a 0.96 floor area ratio. So Ms. Costelli, I don't know if that assists in understanding, or I've convoluted the issue further, but
and Stephanie, and then and again, maybe Wamada or Tech can speak for themselves, but my understanding is that they programmed the site first. So they said, we're interested in doing XYZ of commercial development, XYZ of residential, and then they did the math based on that programming. So how many hundreds of thousands of square feet of residential plus the commercial plus the institutional, and then they divided that by the overall land area to get to that 0.96.
May I say something? If there's a question that's being given, it should be Fairfax County that answers the question, not the developer's lawyer. And if this is still unclear, and Stephanie has to determine whether she feels it's clear or not, then this shouldn't be rushed, and she should get an answer that her complex has asked for. And I recall seeing it, and they have 140 units, and they're within the McLean Civic Association area. And I think she needs a comprehensive answer that shows that Fairfax County understands why it did what it did, so that she can understand, and her association, which is very sophisticated, can understand why Fairfax County did what it did.
Okay, so we've right. No, we've heard that. We heard that, and what we can do is we can agree to get the number. We can still move forward. We don't need to keep delay. It's possible for her to get clarification. We're not even finishing up tonight as it is. So let's not keep punting. I keep hearing punt. We can certainly agree to have clarification on this that will suffice for her and still move forward. And that's what I'm proposing we do.
Stephanie, I remember we had an entire evening where all we did was talk about all of these ratios and numbers during one of the meetings.
So my concern is it appropriately done? Because the 24 acres includes a parking structure that's going to remain there, and it includes some undevelopable area. Is it appropriate to include that in the calculation, or should that be subtracted from the 24 acres? And are we dealing with an appropriately calculated ratio? That's what we're asking.
Okay.
That's how we generally calculate these floor area ratios. In any site, there are almost always spots that you cannot develop due to required setbacks, required yards. Some places to resource protection areas if you're adjacent to a stream, and those are always included in the floor area ratio.
And they're always included.
Yeah, it's of the entire parcel.
There's some factor that's undevelopable. And that's still included. And in fact, that's why you start with 0.96 in the first place? Or? Yeah,
well, in fact, a 0.96 FAR means that there are going to be parts that are undevelopable because it's less floor area than exists on the parcel of land. So anything less than a 1.0 FAR necessarily means there's going to be parts of the parcel that are undevelopable.
Also, it's counting, it's law, the way the calculation is made. So, and the other thing is that the previous comp plan base density was a 0.75. So it's not a big leap from, 0.75 far to 0.95. I mean, it's minimal.
Who's speaking?
This is Darren.
That was Darren. Sorry, that was Darren. Yeah. I guess I would.
But Brian, this is county law, right? I mean, you can't put out a FAR and it's there's a number of code sections that cover that.
Well, right now with the comprehensive plan, we're only dealing with guidance, not law.
No, but in terms of the actual, yeah, that's true. I mean, you're right. This is a guide, so it's not. But in a sense. It's not a big number from 0.75 to 0.96. I mean, obviously changes we want to make sure comport with, what's in keeping and protect as best as possible the surrounding neighbors. But I think Stephanie definitely needs further clarification so that she's comfortable. But I think we can still pass this or vote on it or do whatever and move forward. Because we're not, in essence, completely voting on this whole package, and then if Stephanie raises a red flag at the next meeting, then it hasn't been voted on then.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Darren. Am I correct, Brian? That maybe this will help Stephanie a little bit, or all of us a little bit. But I realize you're saying this is not how you would do it. But if, for example, you took out that area that Stephanie is questioning whether it ought to be involved here, that border area, for example, and you still started with the amount, you would still start with the amount of square footage that WMATA is asking for, correct? But now you would divide by a different acreage. Is that right?
That's right.
Before you'd come out with a different FAR.
Which would even be higher. It would be a very high number because if you've already taken out the excess or the undevelopable part and you only leave the developable part, the FAR has to go up. Just to have more than a one-story building, it has to be above one.
I think that's right, Brian, or anybody else?
David, I think that this is Paul. I think there is sufficient lack of clarity here. I don't, this rushing to say, oh, after all this time, I mean, if this was if it was such a demonstrable need to get it done, we didn't have to take off August. We
had an entire night on this already.
Okay.
But
just wait a second, Cheryl.
You can filibuster however long you want. If you don't have the answer, you don't have the answer. And I think the Lemon Road Civic Association certainly knows a lot about this more than I do. And Stephanie is pretty darn diligent, and she doesn't have the answer. So I'm
okay.
sorry.
So let me ask you this. It's if in calculating the FAR, that is in the zoning code, is it not, Brian?
Yeah, yes, the zoning code does have regulations like that.
And that's the law, is it not?
Well, you know what?
Now, Paul, I'm not talking to you. Don't interrupt.
Okay, wait. One at a time. Darren, you finish. Go ahead.
I have asked Brian an additional question, which is if it's in the zoning code, the calculation of FAR, the zoning code is law. So they would be, in fact, breaking the law. So we do know that this is a 0.96. Stephanie obviously needs additional clarification. Perhaps Paul, I don't know, but this is law. Okay, this calculation is in the zoning code. It is law. It's not a number that they just mysteriously came up with. All right, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to move forward. Okay, this is something that we spent a whole meeting on, and this is not something new. If you have questions, they will be answered for you. As a matter of fact, I'm going to make a motion right now to approve this section as it's written.
No, can we have a motion and we can discuss the motion? But
that's right.
I second the motion.
Okay, so now we'll discuss the motion.
Okay, so you know.
Oh, wait a second, Paul. Before you do, I just want to make sure there's not another hand raised up because I do tend to call you because you speak up, but I'm not seeing anybody else. So go ahead with your point.
Yeah, you know, I actually am, I think, the only lawyer here. And one thing I want to
I have to join you there. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Then you
not that I know more about this.
Then you can confirm for me that quite often people, non-lawyers especially, but also lawyers, make statements, this is the law, and it isn't necessarily the law, and that someone at the very sophisticated Lemon Road Civic Association might know what the law is and what the exceptions to the law are. So these statements, and I spend much of my time, and have built lots of time, dealing with...
You're filibustering.
I am not filibustering anything.
Just wait. Look. I tell you, look, this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to call off discussion here a little bit. We seem to be mostly in agreement that we can't really, not completely, because I don't think Cheryl agrees, but I think I even hear Paul and Darren basically agreeing that we should probably skip over this right now and get clarification and move on to something else, which we're hardly going to be able to do at 9:03 anyway.
There's a motion on the table to accept it as is, and there is a second.
You're correct. Okay. All right. So I'm sorry. The motion is to accept this language as is, and then what? And that's it, without pursuing it further or anything. Correct, Darren? You made the motion, right? What is your motion?
We haven't. So that's not correct.
But
and you don't. Wait a second. Yeah. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand law. So let's get that out there. Okay.
Well, and it's not all.
And the fact is,
no,
I'm talking in general. I'm talking in general.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Please, David.
Yes. Sorry, Darren. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So this is to approve the language. It's not to approve the whole plan text. So we can certainly revisit. I'm repeating myself because, as I said, if Stephanie or anybody else, comes up with that this is wrong before the next meeting or whenever the meeting occurs, then we just go ahead and revise it. It's that simple. But at this point, I think there isn't sufficient doubt in my mind and perhaps others on the committee that we can't agree to vote on this.
Okay, we have a second. Does anybody want to discuss this any further before we vote?
Give me one moment.
Sure, Brian, whatever, yeah.
David, I'd like a roll call on this.
Sure, I don't see why not. All right, so wait a second. Now we got page 20. Tell me when you're ready, Brian. No, I'm not rushing you.
I'm ready.
Okay, so Darren, I'm going to ask you to just repeat your motion so we all know what we're voting on exactly.
The motion is to approve the plan text as written.
And you're talking about page 20, line 45 through page 21, line 4, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. I'm just going to ask each one of you in turn. Cheryl, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Okay. I'm just going down my list. Darren? Okay. Let's see. Holly, once again, I don't know if you can, do we have a problem with, can you unmute yourself, Holly? Or does
I've
somebody?
unmuted Holly.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Okay. Jennifer?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Paul?
No.
Stephanie?
Abstain
Mm.
or no. I'm not
Well,
ready.
decide. Steph, abstain or no?
Abstain.
Okay. I think that leaves it up to me. Geez. Well, it's not going to matter anyway. I think I'm also going to vote no. But it carries in any case.
What's the number? What's the?
Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses, 2 noes, which are you and me, and Stephanie abstaining.
Okay.
And of course, Christopher's not here, so that's what we got. Okay, so it's 9:07. What, if anything, can we do now, Brian, as a practical matter?
We can look at the land use recommendations for subunit A2, the
All right.
JTEC.
Okay. So that is, you're going to put that up?
On that window. It's on page 21, beginning line 47, going to page 22, line 5.
Okay. All right, this being A2, this is the Virginia Tech property. Stephanie, I take it you don't have any similar concern about this one since it's a different property? About the FAR? Or anybody who wants to speak on this? Stephanie, you there? Maybe not. Or does anybody?
Linda's hand is raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Why can't I see that? Hold on, I'm sorry. Oh, now I see it. Yes, Linda, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would
keep
just want,
scrolling.
does the lowering of, from 115 to 105 affect this at all? I just don't know, whether that would make any difference to what it says here.
It wouldn't necessarily. So
Okay.
if it lowers from 115 to 105 on that portion, the way FAR works is they could simply move that to another part of subunit A2. So it would be like taking a couple of stories off the top of that side and moving it to a different part of the subunit.
Oh, so they still could make part of those other buildings that are really high even higher.
Or put or put a portion of the building where it was previously like a courtyard or something like that.
Or not do anything.
Yeah.
Well, they don't have to.
And they don't have to go up to 2.5 FAR. That's simply the maximum.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I just wanted some clarification. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Can I have a motion to approve this language?
I motion to approve.
Okay. Okay.
Second.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to say if you are abstaining or if you're opposed to it, please indicate. Otherwise, I will consider that you voted in favor of this. I'm not hearing.
I'm going to abstain on that.
Okay. All right. All right. That's page. Okay. 2147. Okay. Anybody else want to abstain or oppose that? All right, I think it passes. I guess that would be 7 yeses and 1 abstention. Is what I think we got. All right, Brian, how much else we got? I mean, we're not going to finish, but something done easily.
I think that's it. Other than there were other parts that were skipped over, but because they were based on these recommendations, so those we would just update as they are already in the text.
Okay, let me send you an email on that because before the meeting, I tried to go through everything that I had marked off as accepted and deferred, and I thought there were maybe a few other things. But let me just send you an email on that, and we can see if we're in agreement on that. All right. All right. Okay. We usually
David.
Yes, sure.
I was wondering if we could, if I could just ask for a straw vote on the whole plan as it stands right now, so I can get a sense from everybody if we're ready to move forward.
As long as you consider it a straw vote, but
yeah, no, it's 100%. 100%.
All right, Darren, you would be?
Yes, sir.
Cheryl, how do you feel about it?
I would vote yes.
Okay. Holly? Nothing?
That's a yes from Holly.
Okay, yes. Okay. I can't see. Okay. Jennifer?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Paul?
Maybe.
Okay. Stephanie?
Yes, generally.
Okay.
Pending review of the new, the revised draft.
Okay. All right. Have I skipped over anybody other than myself? I don't think so. I am on the fence about this because it's going to depend on how my civic association reacts to comparisons of traffic delays and traffic volumes. And my problem with the plan, my problem with the plan, frankly, relates to whether it's going to contribute enough of a degree of a traffic increase over what you would get if you didn't amend the plan. And the density contributes to that, which is why I'm a little nervous about the density, because I assume the more density, the more traffic, but maybe that's not so. But by the next meeting, I should know how my community is reacting to that.
David, I just want to ask you, are you aware that Darren is doing a presentation to the Planning and Zoning Committee?
I am, yes, I am aware of that.
I think people should be generally aware because they can sit in on it. Darren didn't inform us. I waited to the end to see if he would, but
okay. Yeah,
Paul, it's just a briefing. There's not going to be anything riveting. And David, I'm glad that you find the need to call me out as you have others, but let's be a little bit more professional. You know, I thought.
I'm sorry, how did I call you?
perhaps-
I'm sorry, how did I call you out?
No, Paul, excuse me.
Oh,
And
okay.
so
Okay.
at any rate,
You're
it
doing a
is a
presentation. You should
briefing.
let people know.
Paul,
Okay. No,
Paul,
wait, tell you what,
grow up.
I'm going to ask you. Wait, I'm
Grow
going to
up.
I'm going to ask you
Listen to
both
me.
to mute yourself. Let me take the
No.
floor a second here.
Wait a second.
because
I've been
I-
called out on something, and I have.
Okay.
I should be
All
able
right.
to respond.
All right.
First off, you need to grow up. Second, okay, this presentation is a briefing. It's not going to cover any new ground. There's not going to be anything riveting. It will actually be published on the MCA website. Thank you very much. Please, let's be a little bit more professional. Thank you. Great meeting, by the way.
Wait, Paul, I'm not going to respond because it's late. I'm going to explain something here because actually I'm aware, Paul, that you spoke with the chair of the Planning and Zoning Committee yesterday, and I spoke with him afterwards, actually, because I happen to want to know exactly what is their procedure. So here's the deal. The Planning and Zoning Committee of the MCA is the body of the MCA that looks at zoning cases, and that's if the MCA rules on them, they do it first through the P&Z committee. That Darren has been designated the MCA person through this whole process. But what's going to happen now that P&Z does not take a position until this is ready to be sent to the Planning Commission, is my understanding. So Darren is going to brief them on all this. At the monthly committee meeting, which is next Tuesday. They meet on the last Tuesday of every month, and you can go on the MCA website, I think, and see that. But Darren, I expect, will just sort of explain what has been going on and what the different views are and all that. What will happen is the Planning and Zoning Committee will have to decide at some point whether they want to prepare a resolution on this that the MCA would adopt as its position. And they will work backwards from when the Planning Commission meeting is. So what they would have to do is prepare a resolution that can be voted on by the full board of the MCA, which meets the first Wednesday of every month, in time to be submitted and testify at the Planning Commission hearing. The chair actually said that, in fact, when it's scheduled, they will appoint a case manager, somebody other than Darren, actually, I think, who will actually take responsibility for briefing everybody on it. So the MCA is by no means finished with this. The MCA is, in fact, just getting started on this in terms of becoming informed and taking a position.
Well, thank you.
MCA.
Thank you for being open and transparent about that.
Okay. So without going back and forth anymore on this, should we call an end to this meeting? I wish we could call on some attendees. It's late. I don't know if do we have any more attendees?
Bruce Jones has had his hand raised.
Yes, I know he has, and I've been dying to call. Bruce, I'll let you speak. I kind of know what you want to talk about. I think I just couldn't call on you before. Go ahead, if you're still there. Bruce?
I'm trying to unmute him, but one moment.
He's told me he's having some problems with
it won't let me unmute him. I don't know if that means his microphone isn't working or what.
Okay.
Bruce, if you're able to put your question into chat.
Unless he's left the meeting. What I could suggest is I know Bruce is in Lemon Road Civic Association and he can communicate with Stephanie and with me. I'm often in touch with him about other things. So I know, in fact, that he had the same concerns that Stephanie was discussing about how to calculate the FAR. And I can confirm with him whether that's what he wants to raise.
I have his email address. We spoke recently.
Okay.
I spoke with him and Stephanie and Robin, so I can email him to see if he had a question.
Okay. All right. Other than that, what do you want to make closing announcements here?
Yeah, just a reminder. Once the recording of this meeting is posted online, I'll send that out to the task force. Prior to the next meeting, we'll be sending, which is scheduled for March 16th, 7 p.m. We're sending out WebEx invitations for that, posting the agenda and registration links on the meetings webpage. And we'll be sending out to the task force the updated draft text, and we'll be posting that to the meetings webpage and the study webpage as well. And with that, I guess that brings us to the end of the meeting. I still am unable to unmute Bruce, so I'll follow up with him directly.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you, everybody. It was a slog, but we did the easy stuff the first time. Each time gets harder. I'm not surprised. Okay, good night. We'll all talk in another month or less.
Thank you all.
Bye.